Get it started. Okay, you need to turn in your book or to the online link that I provided. It's on page 631. It's Stephen Crane's War is Kind. This is the same person who wrote The Open Boat. Remember, we're still in the realism / naturalism section of this course. I think Tyler's description of naturalism was really good. Tyler, do you want to run that by us again about naturalism and the open boat?
Sure. But naturalism is a literary movement that influenced literature in the late 1800s. Its characteristics encompass the principles of Darwinism and the inescapable fate of a man by heredity and social class. Characters usually come from a lower class and lack of moral compass. The theme includes a detachment free from emotion and scientifically based. Naturalism is reflected in the open boat as Crane creates external forces that rob the characters of all power and control. The story captures people in society who fall into the lower class. The individuals become helpless human beings with no control of their actions as the universe dominates the events of their life. It is as if there is a philosophy that the universe has already predetermined the fate of the characters. Hopelessness runs deep and contributes to cynical view of life. In this story, the four men were always struggling against some external force they cannot control. Hopelessness robs their free will, and they become as puppets to the world forces. Nature acts with its power and randomly negatively influences the character's life's path.
That was great. That really summed it up perfectly. So characters are struggling against forces that they can't control. There's a feeling of hopelessness. And then there develops a cynicism in people. So cynicism means what? If someone is cynical, what does that mean?
Oh, like always.
I'm sorry.
Is it like always seeing like the bad side of things?
That's exactly what it is. Hi, Braden. So glad to see you here. Let me mark you as present. I had a question mark by you.
Hey, Brian.
That's great. Wonderful. All right, so now we're moving from the open boat to a poem that he wrote that's called War is Kind. And War is Kind, you know, when you read a poem, you have to know what the tone is. But when you're reading, it's really hard to tell what the tone is. You have to work a lot harder. You know, if you're listening to someone read or listening to someone speak, or listening to someone perform, you can hear the tone of their voice. So that gives you a real big clue, you know, about the meaning. But, you know, if I look at my window and and I say, oh, beautiful, you know, you get the idea from my expression and from my tone that I'm really pleased, you know, by looking out the window with what I see. But if I look out the window and I say, oh, beautiful, maybe it's raining or something, you know, it's the exact same words, but the tone lets you know what the meaning is. So, you know, the first time you know, it was the person is glad, you know, it's a beautiful day, but the second time, maybe it's raining, person can't go out. The words are the same, but the tone. So when you're reading, it's real hard to figure out the tone. So I'm going to read this poem to you, and I want you to listen, try to figure out what the tone is. Is he serious? Is he literally saying what he means? Or is he being sarcastic? So here, does everybody have your book on page 631, or there's a link on the announcements online link. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay. Do not weep, maiden, for war is kind. Because your lover threw wild hands toward the sky and the affrighted steed ran on alone, do not weep. War is kind. Hoarse booming drums of the regiment, little souls who thirst for fight. These men were born to drill and die. The unexplained glory flies above them. Great is the battle god, great and his kingdom, a field where 1,000 corpses lie. Do not weep, babe, for war is kind. Because your father tumbled in the yellow trenches, raged at his breast, gulped and died. Do not weep, war is kind. Swift blazing flag of the regiment, eagle with crest of red and gold. These men were born to drill and die. Point for them the virtue of slaughter. Make plain to them the excellence of killing, and a field where 1,000 corpses lie. Mother whose heart hung humble as a button on the bright splendid shroud of your son. Do not weep, war is kind. Okay, what do you get out of that?
Sarcasm.
Sarcasm, very sarcasm. If you look at the stanzas that are indented, you know, it says, hoarse booming drums of the regiment, little souls who thirst for fight. Little souls who thirst for fight. These men were born to drill and die. You remember when we talked about romanticism, we talked about how war, how romanticism glorifies war, like how great it is to get on your horse and go off to war with your flags and everything. You know, it's a glorious thing. That's a romanticized view of war. And that's the kind of writing before the war. But after the war, we're getting this kind of writing because people are brought back down to reality. And they realize, you know, they get real now. They realize war is not so glorious because there's all these bodies lying on the field, rotting in the sun. And then look at the ones, stanzas on the left. Here we have the people who are truly affected by the war. First, we have the maidens, the young women, the young unmarried women, and they're losing their boyfriends, they're losing their fiancés, you know, so they are really, you know, their whole life has changed. And then the next one, we have the widows, the women whose husbands are killed and their babies. The babies have no father. And then at the, well, the middle one is about the babies, and the last one is about the mothers who lost their sons. So when he says war is kind, what are we really reading between the lines? War is not kind. War is
taken.
So sarcasm is when you say the opposite of what you mean, and the only way that you can tell is by the sarcasm, by the tone of the voice. Now, sometimes, you know, when we're talking with people and people deadpan and they say the opposite of what they mean, but the only way that you can tell is not by the tone of their voice, but because what they say is so ridiculous, you know, that it couldn't possibly be true. So that's, you know, that's a different thing. All right, any comments about war is kind? What are your reactions?
It was sad.
Yeah.
It's like, it just talks about how everyone's like in pain or dead. Like,
What about Stephen Crane's writing ability?
He's a very good writer.
Yeah, Stephen Crane. Anybody else want to say anything? Hi, Greg. Hi, Greg. Okay. Okay. I don't know how to set up my mic. Can someone explain to him how to turn on your mic?
bottom left corner, there's a thing that says mute or not, and then stop video or not. And you just click on them.
Mine is in the top right-hand corner, the mute button. Is yours on the left bottom?
Mine's on the bottom
On
left.
the bottom left.
Bottom left.
Mine's on the top right.
Do you find it, Greg?
Working?
I think I heard him.
Oh,
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
Greg.
good. Great. Okay. All right. That is War is Kind, and that is kind of our last naturalistic piece. The next poems that we're going to read are by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Dunbar was born in, let me see, where's my note on that? Dayton, Ohio, in 1872. So this was just 7 years after the the Civil War. And before the war, both of his parents had been slaves in Kentucky. And so they were set free because of the war. And so they, and then they moved to Ohio, and then they were trying to get him the very best education that they could. One of the things about, well, I'll come to that later. He wrote this poem called an Ante-bellum Sermon in dialect. Now, I tried to post the link to Ante-bellum Sermon, and I noticed today before your class that that link didn't show up on the announcement. So then I opened it up and was editing it and trying to insert the link. And then no matter how many times I tried, or from whatever source I tried to insert a link, any link with this title, it wouldn't accept it. So I don't know if there's censorship there or what. So how many of you do have access to the text? Okay, Tyler, do you have your textbook?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I need to grab it.
Okay, and Braden, how about you?
mine's locked up in the school.
Oh, okay. I wasn't able to post a link, but it might be that you can find the link on your own if you just type in an Ante-bellum Sermon on
What's the name? Again?
It's Ante-bellum.
Okay.
If you can find an Ante-bellum Sermon by Paul Laurence Dunbar, if you can find that. Okay. While Braden is looking for that, let's discuss the meaning of antebellum. Who can tell me what antebellum means?
It's the period before the Civil War happened in the South.
Very good, right. If you didn't already automatically know that, you could figure out the meaning by breaking down the word into Latin syllables. So what does ante mean, A-N-T-E? Before. You know, like if you're playing poker and you ante up before, that means you put your money out before. So ante, and then what does bellum mean? Bellum?
Well, Bella in French is pretty, if that.
No, that's not it. Bellum.
Okay.
War.
What?
War.
War? Is that what someone said? War. Yes, bellum means war. So antebellum means before the Civil War. Like if you're talking about an antebellum gown, well, that would be the kind of, you know, dress, big dress that the Southern belles wore before the war on the plantations. Or so antebellum dress. Okay, so antebellum means before the war. Now, Paul Dunbar, in his early writing, he wrote in dialect because he was really trying to capture the sounds of African American sermon, which it has its own beauty and rhythm. I hope you've ever had a chance to listen to an African American sermon, because it's very uplifting and has its own music, and he wrote in the dialect to try to capture that. Later, he was criticized by Black people and white people because writing the dialect made it look like Black people were uneducated, and people thought, that that was insulting or something. So later on, he stopped writing in dialect. But I think it's neat how the dialect does capture the sound. I'm sorry, question?
I was saying it was like I was laughing at myself reading it because it like gave you the accent. It was like.
Right, yeah.
Newt ended up reading it to me because I like couldn't understand it, and then so Newt like just grabbed the book and just started reading it, and it was so good. I was so proud.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna read it to you, and I'm not gonna be reading it perfectly because I'm not fluent in the dialect. Yes, Tyler?
What page?
634.
634. Thank you.
Were you able to find it, Braden?
Yes. Is it like really, really hard words?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's dialect. How about you, Gregory? Gregory? Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. An Ante-bellum Sermon. We is gathered here, my brothers, in this howling wilderness for to speak some words of comfort to each other in distress. And we chooses for our subject this. We'll explain it by and by. And the Lord said, Moses, Moses. And the man said, here am I. Now, old Pharaoh down in Egypt was the worst man ever born. And he had the Hebrew children down there working in his corn. Till the Lord got tired of his fooling, and says he, I'll let him know. Look here, Moses, go tell Pharaoh for to let them children go. And if he refuse to do it, I will make him rue the hour, for I'll empty down on Egypt all the vials of my power. Yes, he did, and Pharaoh's army wasn't worth a half a dime. But the Lord will help his children. You can trust him every time. And you enemies may assail you in the back and in the front, but the Lord is all around you for to bear the battle's brunt. They can forget your chains and shackles from the mountains to the sea, but the Lord will send some Moses for to set his children free. And the land shall hear his thunder like a blast from Gabriel's horn. For the Lord of hosts is mighty when he girds his armor on. For fear someone mistakes me, I will pause right here to say that I'm still a preaching ancient. I ain't talking about today, but I tell you, fellow Christians, things will happen mighty strange. Now the Lord done this for Israel, and his ways don't never change. And the love he showed to Israel wasn't all on Israel spent. Now don't run and tell your masters that I's preaching discontent, cause I isn't. I's a judging Bible people by their acts. I's a giving you the scripture. I's a handing you the facts. Cause old Pharaoh believed in slavery, but the Lord, he let him see that the people he put breath in, every mother's son was free. And there's others think like Pharaoh, but they calls the scripture liar. For the Bible says a servant is a worthy of his hire. And you can't get round nor through that. And you can't get over it. For whatever place you get it, this here Bible tool fit. So you see the Lord's intention, ever since the world began, was that his almighty freedom should belong to every man. But I think it would be better if I'd pause again to say that I'm talking about our freedom in a Biblistic way. But the Moses is a-coming, and he's coming sure and fast. We can hear his feet a-trumping. We can hear his trumpet blast. But I want to warn you people, don't you get too greedy. And don't you get to bragging about these things. You wait and see. But when Moses with his power comes and set us children free, we will praise the gracious master that has given us liberty. And we'll shout our hallelujahs on that mighty reckoning day when we're so recognized as citizens. Children, let us pray. Okay, were you able to understand it even through the dialect?
Well,
Okay. Isn't this really just the most appropriate time for this assignment to come up, because this Sunday is Passover, and I don't know if you've noticed that on TV they're showing all these religious shows about Christ, and one of them was called the 10 Commandments. That showed, I watched it last week. You know, it was about a 4-hour movie, I guess, but it was about this very story. About Moses. You know, Moses put on the water, and then he was raised up in the household of the rulers of Egypt, and he didn't know that he was born, you know, from slaves until he got older. But anyway, he had been raised, you know, with Pharaoh. Pharaoh was he had been raised with Pharaoh as his brother. And then later, you know, he faced Pharaoh to fight, you know, to get, and this is where, you know, Pharaoh's armies were attacking. And then what happened after that? Anybody, can you tell me? They got trapped, and then the oceans were parted so that Moses and his people could go through the water. And then as Pharaoh's armies passed through, then the waters closed in on them. So anyway, that's what this sermon was talking about, you know, Pharaoh's army and all that. So what is your reaction to this poem? And what analogy is he drawing in this poem?
Between the slaves in America to the slaves with Pharaoh and Moses.
That's right. Yeah, just parallel the same situation. And I think, you know, it has a real deep message. Yes, it's written in dialect, you know, and later on he quit writing in dialect because he was very well educated. But personally, you know, as an anthropologist, I love it, you know, when the dialect, you know, is presented just like it was. I can't quite get the powerful music that would really come from a real African-American preacher who would preach this. But I hope you do have the opportunity to hear, go to an African-American church someday and listen.
I looked up a video of it.
Huh?
I looked up a video.
Yeah. Which one did you see? I looked up I saw a video too, but which one did you see? Is it one where he's standing outside?
Yes. And then they did like little flashbacks with like pictures.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. I might post a link to that if they'll let me. For some reason, the Canvas is not letting any links to an Ante-bellum sermon be published, and I don't know if they think it's degrading to Black people or what. But anyway, I can't post the link. All right. Now let's go to the next poem, which is called "We Wear the Mask." If you don't have the textbook, then you can click the online link. That one is there.
Yeah.
Everybody there on page 436? Okay, let's read this one. We wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Okay, what's the meaning of this poem?
Is it trying to like say that
You
they
pretend.
like put on a smile and like don't let people know that they're like hurt or whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
Addison, Addie, did you start to say something?
Oh, it was basically the same thing. I was just saying that like people cover up how they're really feeling.
All right. So after the Civil War, Black people were ostensibly free. They had been freed by the war. So ostensibly means, for all, on the outside, but not really, not really. So they were free, but they weren't really free. Um, they uh, they had very menial, low-paying jobs. They somehow found themselves in a subclass of society. They were looked down on, but they had to have jobs. They had to be paid, and so when they work, like if they were working as a servant or as a housekeeper or as a waiter, and then later on, years later, as elevator operators and jobs like that, they had this smile and, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, a very obeisant attitude, obedient attitude. But underneath that smile, the smile was just a mask to hide their true feelings, because they were really in anguish. And I don't know if I've told you this story. It might repeat something that I've told you before, but this is the way it was when I was growing up, and for the first 15 years of my life. Black people only had substandard positions in society, and it was only when I was in high school that Martin Luther King was leading people on peaceful protest to try to get Black people accepted in a better way in society. And I was in high school when the school integrated. When I was your age, maybe a year younger, then my town and all towns in Texas that had Black people, they had a separate high school for Black people. So in Sweetwater, Texas, where I grew up, we had, Sweetwater High School, or it had a name, Newman High School, but then we also had Woodson High School, and only the Black students went to Woodson High School. But the first year that they integrated, they didn't integrate everybody at once. They just gradually, brought students over to graduate until, and they just did it gradually, added a few every year until it was totally integrated. But that first day that Black students came to my school, they had about 200 cars parked around the school because the parents of white kids were worried that there would be trouble. And they wanted to be close to the school so that they could go in and grab their child if there was any kind of trouble or any kind of race riot or anything like that. So, but you know what? There was no trouble. There was absolutely no trouble. And Black kids and white kids got to know each other and became friends, and everybody realized that, hey, we're all just alike. And we all went home and taught our parents, hey, they're just like us, and so it was a big shift in society, and things started changing after that. But this "we wear the mask" was applicable right up through 1970. Okay, I see a lot of inappropriate grinning going on, so I'm just wondering what y'all are really doing. Okay, so how do you feel about this poem?
I think it's like kind of crazy, like how like all the black people have to like fake being happy and stuff. It seems kind of messed up.
Yes, it was very messed up.
I feel like people today can still refer to this poem.
I couldn't
Ways.
understand what you said. There might be a problem with your mic. Maybe
Yeah.
put your mic toward your mouth a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was thinking like people can refer to this poem today
Still.
just because there's still race discrimination and all that, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We haven't got through to where everybody's really equal yet. And so there's still problems there. But I think this is one of Paul Laurence Dunbar's, great poems. And just imagine, that he wrote it probably in the end of the 1800s, probably around 1897. He wrote it 1897, and still over 100 years later, it still applies. So the literature really lasts and gives us great lessons in life, I think, and or a reflection of life, especially in realism. Realism reflects. All right, let's go to the next one, and this will be our last poem for today. The title is Sympathy. And if you look at the first line of each of these, it says, I know what the caged bird feels. And the next one, I know why the caged bird beats his wings. And then the last one, I know why the caged bird sings. Does this ring any bells for you? I know why the caged bird sings.
No.
Okay, well, he wrote this in 1899, but 100 years later, Maya Angelou, probably one of our most famous poets, she wrote an autobiography. She's a great poet. She read poetry at President Bill Clinton's inauguration, and President Obama gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and she's written many books of poetry, but her autobiography was called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. So just off the top of it, before we've even read the poem, what is that? What do you think that means? I know why the caged bird sings.
Like, even though he's trapped, while he still like tries to be happy, I guess.
Right. Well, he's trapped, but think about what sing might be a metaphor for. I know why the caged bird sings.
Like size? Yeah.
Like Rapunzel?
That's what we call a non sequitur. Non sequitur means it does not follow. So that was a non sequitur. But I know why the caged bird sings. Oh, well, what did Maya Angelou do in her life?
You gotta freedom.
Yes, but she wrote poetry, didn't she? So we could, the caged bird sings, that could be a metaphor for a Black person writing. She writes, because she has to write about the troubles that Black people face still today. So let's read this poem and then talk about it. I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass, and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the paint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the caged bird feels. I know why the caged bird beats his wings till its blood is red on the cruel bars. For he must fly back to his perch and cling when he fain would be on the bough a swing. And a pain still throbs in the old, old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why he beats his wings. I know why the caged bird sings, ah me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. Isn't that just so sad and yet so beautiful at the same time? The sound, the rhythm, and the deep meaning, the parallels drawn between a caged bird and a Black person living in American society. I know why the caged bird beats his wings till his blood is red on the cruel bars. What is the underlying meaning of this?
Why they fight for freedom.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. They are still beating, and you know, it's really sad. Sympathy. All right. Let's see. I guess that's all we're going to do today. We're not going to do Frederick Douglass, and we won't be coming back to that. We have one more story, To Build a Fire. Some of you have already read it, and we will talk about that at the next one. And then that will definitely be the end of our realism, naturalism section of this course. And then we're going to move on to modern poetry. So that'll be, in some cases, lighter, I hope. But the poems, we should be able to go through that pretty fast. Some things I want to tell you. I have made all the deadlines on all the assignments this semester open-ended. So if for some reason you didn't get your assignment in, you're still able to get it in. I'll accept your assignments until the course is over. There does come a cutoff point eventually, but if I were you, I would just try to get your assignments done as quickly as possible. Jay Lee is exempt from the final exam. She's the only one in this class who is exempt because she did apply for graduation to walk across the stage. And even though commencement was canceled, she had paid her fee, so she gets to skip the final exam. But the rest of you will need to take a final exam. So, but don't worry, I'll give you a study sheet to study, and the study sheet will prepare you for the exam, and it shouldn't be difficult for you at all. There was a question brought up about changing people's grades to pass-fail, but for right now, they're not going to do that. They're going to go ahead with the regular grades as usual. They may reconsider that at the end of the semester. It might not apply to dual credit students, but I just, for one reason, because it affects people's, it doesn't raise people's grade averages as much as they would like for it to be raised. And I know in high school, that's pretty important when it comes for valedictorian and salutatorian. So right now, it's the status quo on the grading. Do we have 100% attendance today?
Dylan.
Not Dylan.
But
Who we're missing?
Dylan.
Dylan.
Oh, Dylan. Okay, Dylan. Well, I have been in touch with Dylan, and we're working it out. So I think he's gonna be okay. Now, all right. What else did I need to tell you? The deadline to drop this course, and this doesn't affect. I don't think it affects anybody in here. I hope not. But the drop deadline is April 17th. So if I had not been in some of my classes, you know, I haven't seen 2 or 3 of the students since before spring break, and they didn't check out and they haven't turned any work. So I'm going to be forced to drop them. But everybody here is checked in, and hopefully everybody's going to get their work in. Let me see, what else do I need to tell you? How about our next meeting? Was this a good time for all of you to meet?
Yes, ma'am.
1:50 on, it's your regular class time, but we'll only meet on Thursday. Does that sound okay? All right, only on Thursday. All right, do you have any questions that you need to ask me?
Have you graded our last essay?
Have I graded it?
Yeah.
I'm caught up on my grading. Let me check. Yes, I've graded every essay that was turned in. So there is a grade on yours. Braden, are you able to check it?
Yes, the last time I checked, it wasn't in a few days.
Yeah, I got caught up. Good questions. Any more good questions? Is everybody okay physically and mentally? Okay,
No.
that's good. It was sad reading all the newspaper today to see all the many events that have been canceled, you know, like Fandangle Sampler and all that. It's really, but we got to do this. Are y'all wearing masks when you go out?
I haven't been out in 22 days, so.
I haven't.
Heck no.
not be there.
Okay, if you do go out, please wear a mask. It's more to protect other people than it is to protect you. But anyway, you should wear a mask. I wore one the other day, but I don't have to go out for another week and a half, I don't think. All right, let's see. Are we good?
I think so.
Okay, well then, I'm gonna stop the recording. I'd like to leave the room open because I'd just like to have a small chat with Greg. So I'm gonna stop recording right now.